This is Crater Lake National Park, home to the deepest lake in the US, a volcano within a volcano, endangered newts, and the most epic views. And 2 weekends a year, you can ride around it totally car-free. And that, friends, is why we're here. Yep, we rode 25 miles along the Rim Drive in Crater Lake National Park in Oregon this September because A, it's a great excuse to hop on a bike and ride. B, the views at this park are spectacular. I mean, just look at that lake. And C, to learn a bit about the unique ecology and history of this wild volcanic caldera. Also, because for 2 Saturdays in September every year during the annual Ride the Rim event, the park shuts down this 23-mile stretch of road to vehicles so cyclists can take over and ride stress-free without worrying about whether motorists are too distracted by the stunning surroundings to share the road. Rad, right? The best part? The event is totally free. You're invited to make a donation, of course, or buy rad swag like t-shirts that stand as bragging rights, but otherwise it costs nothing to participate thanks to funding and organization from Discover Klamath and a volunteer team from Friends of Crater Lake. That all means between the zero-cost entry and the fact that all bikes are welcome means this is a super accessible experience almost everyone can enjoy. You can ride a fixie if you want. There are obviously tons of road bikes out here, gravel bikes. We're on mountain bikes just because that's what we have. There's so many e-bikes. Like, whatever you want to ride, you can ride it here. And while we weren't always riding at the same speed, we were always able to stay connected thanks to our very favorite helmets from SENA, which contain the company's mesh intercom system. And they don't just make bike helmets, by the way. They make everything from motorcycling to rock climbing to sailing. But we are huge fans of the SENA M1 Evo helmet, which is designed specifically for mountain biking, but can be worn during any style of cycling. The helmets have small built-in microphones and speakers and use SENA's world-renowned mesh intercom system. And we love this rad tech because it means we can connect our helmets at the press of a button, chat without having to shout over wind noise or traffic. We never have to turn or look over our shoulders to talk. We can check on one another's progress if somebody falls behind. And they just generally make riding more fun whether we're on the road or on a trail. And if we don't want to chat, we can pair our phones with the helmet so we can listen to music or get turn-by-turn directions without, doing the Bluetooth speaker thing and annoying everyone around us. We used the intercom system to chat throughout our rim ride, warn each other when we were pulling off to enjoy an epic view, and check to make sure the other person was behind us during those long, speedy downhills.
Hey, should we get some pizza after this?
Heck yes we should. And we did all of it without headphones or other devices blocking the ambient sound around us, so we could still hear what was going on. Honestly, we can't imagine ever riding without our SENA helmets again. Now, there are 2 sections of the route. East Rim Drive, which is 23 miles and 2,565 feet of elevation gain, and the whole loop, which includes the West Rim Drive, which is not closed to vehicles, and the total is 32 miles and 4,028 feet of elevation gain. We just did the car-free portion, and whoa, was it a blast. There were fast and frequent sections of downhill, tons of opportunities to turn into pull-offs to enjoy the views of the lake, aid stations with bathrooms and snacks, and yes, plenty of prolonged uphills. Which seems like a perfect time to mention our sponsor. This video was sponsored by Tailwind Nutrition, which makes our favorite new plant-based endurance fuel and recovery mix, all designed for endurance athletes. Or, regular people who like to ride bikes long distances. They make tons of baller flavors in both, and they're all delicious. The endurance fuels contain plenty of electrolytes, but also easily digestible calories to help keep you moving on long days in the saddle or on the trail, and no fake sugars, so no gross stevia aftertaste. We sipped several packets on the ride, both with caffeine and without, and they kept our brains from getting hangry, our legs from cramping, and our bodies from dehydrating. And after the ride, we replenished our protein and calorie reserves with the recovery mix, which has the perfect amount of sweetness to feel like a little treat and the perfect amount of calories to help feed our bellies and help sore muscles recover. So grab a bulk bag or assortment of single-serve packets for your next ride. It's all you need, really. You've got this. But back to the ride. Yes, there's one optional section that shares the road with cars. Don't want to ride with cars? No problem. There are shuttles that transport cyclists through that section so they can get back to their cars at either the beginning or the end. And while the ride is a blast and challenging, but not brutal thanks to, long uphill sections, but not impossibly steep inclines, the real attraction is Crater Lake itself, which is not only a stunner, but fun fact, was formed by a volcano about 7,700 years ago. Yep. This now dormant volcano was once known as Mount Mazama and probably stood about 12,000 feet tall. And when it went off, it was intense and devastating. It exploded with the magnitude of about 100 times the blast of Mount St. Helens in Washington in 1980, which means this wiped out anything living within scores of miles of the blast zone. After the eruption, the entire top of the mountain collapsed into the magma chamber, creating this massive caldera, and over the following centuries, it began to then fill with water as life returned extremely slowly to the area. The result? This massive picture-perfect lake surrounded by forest. It is the deepest, cleanest, bluest lake in the US. It's 1,943 feet deep. That's quite a bit deeper than Lake Tahoe, which comes in at number 2. But why is this lake so dang blue? Well, for a couple of reasons. Because the lake is so deep, the lake basically swallows up all of the colored light waves in the spectrum except blue. So only blue waves are bounced back and reflect to our eyes. That's because the color blue has a smaller wavelength than other colors, so it gets scattered by much smaller particles, even gas molecules, making it the only color that we visually see. And that effect is even more pronounced because the water here is so clean and clear that there aren't larger particles for other colored wavelengths to bounce off of, resulting in this brilliant blue hue. Now, why the water is so clean and clear is explained by one main geographic anomaly. Nothing feeds into this lake except rain and snowmelt. There are no rivers, streams, or other lakes that even trickle into the caldera. That's the correct term for this giant deep bowl, which means there are no other water sources bringing contaminants with them, which would muddy the water and make it appear not quite so blue. So this is not just the deepest, but one of the cleanest, clearest lakes in the US. In fact, it's so clear and clean that moss and other aquatic plants grow at crazy depths, as far down as 328 feet. And yes, you can swim in Crater Lake. It's best done via a long hike down the Cleetwood Cove Trail or by taking a shuttle or boat tour out to Wizard Island. Yep, you can visit that little pointed island in Crater Lake and have yourself a nice little afternoon out there. Even take a hike to the summit, which is also volcanic, by the way. Yep. Crater Lake contains a volcano within a volcano. They're both dormant and not expected to erupt again for ages and ages, though, in case you were worried. But how wild is that? It's not the only place in the world where this exists, but it's still pretty dang cool. But let's get back to the lake for a sec and talk about what else lives here besides moss. Naturally, people did. Several groups, now known as the Klamath tribes, lived in and around the mountain and then the caldera for thousands of years before settlers and white explorers moved westward and discovered the lake. To the Klamath tribes, the mountain and the lake that now stands in its place were and are a place of sacred significance. Still, they've been excluded, exploited, and ignored for decades, as is America's way, unfortunately, but that's a whole other sordid side of history, and we'll link to more information about that below. As for animals, for a very long time after the volcano erupted, nothing lived here. It was basically sterile. Tons and tons of 2,000 plus degree magma will do that to a place. Over time, of course, life found a way, including via a newt population. The Mazama Newt. Now, these newts are unique to Crater Lake, closely related to the rough-skinned newt, but evolved to lose their built-in toxins because there were no natural predators in the lake or the caldera. Unfortunately, as often happens when explorers and colonizers started claiming places as their own, they thought they could make nature better. So in 1888, before the national park was officially established in 1902, folks decided it would be a great idea to add a few varieties of fish to the lake to lure more visitors. Pun not intended. They introduced rainbow trout and kokanee salmon, among other species, and for a while, everything seemed to be just fine. But when people realized the salmon didn't have enough food to eat to really thrive, they decided to add crayfish to the mix in 1914, which again was to feed fish that was only there so visitors could go fishing. And as often happens when mankind introduces species into natural habitats that aren't supposed to be there, the crayfish took over. And by took over, I mean they started killing newts left and right, because apparently they make a pretty tasty meal. Now, the newts are endangered because even after several attempts to curb the crayfish population over the years, every effort has failed, and the newts are on a fast track to extinction. Now, time will tell if the biologists researching the issue will find a viable solution before that happens. But in the meantime, this park is still a spectacular place to visit. Whether you're participating in Ride the Rim in September, exploring Wizard Island, hiking through practically untouched old-growth forest, or just sitting on the rim enjoying the view, there's no bad way to experience this park. Want to see more epic views of beautiful parks? Check out these videos. Then grab your bike, go find some beautiful scenery, learn a bit about what makes it unique, and wander on.